Today, I'm pleased to introduce an industry thought leader who has supported our Retail Tomorrow platform from the inception. Neil Stern is a senior partner at McMillan Doolittle, a published author of 2 books, and a widely quoted expert on domestic and international retail innovation, serving retail clients worldwide. Recognized as a visionary around future retail concepts, he brings a relevant perspective to the post-COVID retail landscape. Neil will be facilitating an upcoming Retail Tomorrow series we'll be launching in mid-July, Brave New Retail World. And you'll hear more about that today. If you have questions during Neil's presentation, please use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Without further delay, I'm happy to turn it over to you, Neil.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. And great to be here virtually and talk a little bit about what's happening in the world of retail. And as we all know, it's a lot. There's a lot going on. I'm reminded there's a wonderful scene in Hamilton where Thomas Jefferson comes back from France, where he was ambassador, and he comes to the U.S. and basically there's a song that then goes, "What did I miss?" Right? What did I miss? If you happen to be under a rock over for the past 6 months, a lot has changed in our world, and part of the Brave New Retail World is really to start to unpack that and to talk about what the future looks like. So I'm going to just kind of have some opening thoughts and talk about what we've been seeing happening in the retail world in the age of COVID. And you know, no surprise, we're experiencing an unprecedented shock to the system. We just have not seen something like this before. COVID-19 leading to a retail downturn. You know, basically an enforced shutdown of retail, which we've never seen before. We're in a recession. The question is how long it lasts. And then to add things on top of that, a period of social unrest and really rethinking kind of what society looks like. And of course, you know, we're tracking the numbers like everybody else. And, you know, we've never seen the ups and the downs, frankly, that we've seen before in GDP, consumer confidence, unemployment going up, hopefully unemployment going back down, and then what's happened in retail sales. And you know, just yesterday we had a huge bounce back in May. So again, if you look at the gyrations of these numbers, we haven't seen this before. Jack Kleinheltz, who's the chief economist of the NRF, sort of kind of puts it in perspective and just says, you know, these elements happening together is not comparable to any time in our economic history, right? So as we're looking ahead to the future, it is tough to forecast what's going on out there. So what I thought I'd do today is kind of introduce a framework, at least, to discuss these issues, understanding that things are moving fast. But we think we can kind of use this framework, and then during the Brave New Retail World webinars that we're going to have, get deeper into each one of these subjects. You know, so what's happening out there? Store closures, not a new phenomenon. 2019 saw record closures. 2020, by best estimates, as we're halfway through the year, suggests we could have 20 to 25,000 closings. And you know, you can look at this in the context of history. Again, it's unprecedented. In the world of food retail, the chart on the left, you know, we were going through, you know, frankly, a 50-year shift of food away from home, you know, food consumed in restaurants growing at the expense of food at home. And then COVID comes around, and you can see that jump in April 2020, where again, essentially restaurants were shut down, and we had this tremendous spike in food at home, which kind of reverses that pattern. And you know, the question is, how long will that last? Most forecasts suggest that the food at home will stay elevated over probably the next 18 months. Why? We're not returning to our normal patterns quite as quickly as you know, as you would seem. Some estimates have potentially a quarter of the restaurants in the U.S., particularly independent restaurants, closing. So we think we'll see this elevation of food at home, and that has a lot of implications as we'll talk about in the future. Grocery e-commerce, and this is a subject that we will have as one of our webinar topics. Basically, it grew, a decade's worth of growth in about 2 months. And if you look at what's happening on retail, of course, e-commerce sales were significantly elevated, up almost 50%. But grocery was actually the fastest growing e-commerce category in the month of April. And that growth has a couple implications to it. One is we're bringing a lot of new customers into grocery e-com who hadn't experienced it before. We're also seeing kind of the pickup of new ideas and new concepts, buy online, pick up in store, buy online, pick up curbside, growing faster. And, best projections are that we're going to go, we went from about 3% of food online to around 10% today, and that will probably settle in around 6% or so, but we'll still grow from there. So, grocery e-commerce becomes a major thing to think about. And as probably a lot of us experience as consumers during the period where we had that huge surge in demand, it was also a pretty poor experience, right? It was difficult to get items. There was huge out of stocks. And that's going to lead retailers to kind of rethink supply chain and rethink how they service e-commerce. And, this photo here shows a Safeway store with robotic technology to do picking. That bottom right corner is a tease for a future webinar that we'll do. But it's the Amazon Woodland Hills store. And a year ago, they announced they were going to open an Amazon branded store, and we all got excited about it. And today, that store is never open to the public, at least to date, and it's serving as a dark store for Amazon to fulfill orders. And I think we're going to see more of that phenomena of dark stores happen as we go into the future. And some of the provocative questions as we think about this is, does COVID usher in a new age of contactless experiences? This is a Wow Bao restaurant sitting in Chicago that is essentially a completely automated restaurant, touchless. Is this a wave of the future? The bar for safety and sanitation standards will obviously be raised. Cultural norms will likely shift in the way we interact in the public. And, the question becomes, do we go back to the way things were before? And, it's fascinating to look at a photo and look at a picture. This would have 6 months ago been this amazing foodie experience, and we're gathered around and we're sharing food. And I think now a lot of people look at this photo and they say, ew, is this, I don't want to be that near. I'm not going to be sharing product with other people. So the standards kind of shift as we look to the future. As I've spoken about before, we see really disruption in retail happening in 3 broad categories. The first is the growth of extreme value and really taking price to the next level. The second is extreme convenience and removing friction from the buying process. And the third was extreme experience and, creating amazing engagement with customers in the store. And this kind of trends, and I was speaking to this, well before COVID. And then the question becomes, okay, how does a post-COVID world kind of affect these trends? Does it accelerate them? Does it change fundamentally what they're about? And what I'd like to just kind of cover briefly this morning is, I think it's going to accelerate a couple of these trends and really cause us to rethink this notion of experience, right? What will that look like in the future? So extreme value, the elements of extreme value are price. How do you get the lowest sustainable price? The notion of a treasure hunt, being able to find an experience and look for new things. And the third piece of it is private label becomes a factor in allowing retailers to sell for less and to provide differentiation. Value was growing before the recession. I showed you that chart on store closures. The vast majority of store openings were really in this extreme value bucket. Think dollar stores like Dollar General, clubs like Costco, Walmart and supercenters, all driving this notion of extreme value. And we talk about Costco, it's a perfect embodiment of those three experiences. It has extremely low prices driven by low margins. It is a treasure hunt. You kind of go to Costco, and if you're like me, you might have 5 or 6 items on your list, and you walk out having spent $300 because you bought stuff you didn't think. Costco doesn't have aisle directories, right? They're encouraging the kind of the wandering and treasure hunt. And of course, Kirkland has become a significant and major brand for them, $30 billion plus brand, building off private label. Aldi continues to grow, and it was doing fabulous pre-COVID, and it will do well afterwards. Simplifying the experience, fewer SKUs, heavily private label. But if you start to look at let's call it the new Aldi, there's an end cap on gluten-free products on the right. There's organic produce on the left. So Aldi is offering low prices, but also staying on trend. The second category is talking about extreme convenience. And, technology plays a role in this, right? Providing technology to make the experience easier. All the elements potentially of where e-commerce comes into play through subscription services, delivery to the door, pickup either curbside or in store. And, this notion of being contactless used to be driven around the idea of just making it simpler for the customers. Now safety sanitation comes into play, where not only is it simpler, but it could also be couched around this idea of safety. So we think post-COVID in the world we're in, contactless is going to grow even more. And really, friction is every barrier that retailers put in place to prevent customers from buying a product. And there's a lot of them in the current retail store. There's more of those actually that are now driven by the needs around COVID. So what is a contactless future? What's extreme convenience going to look like? The growth of click and collect, the growth of pickup, making it easier for customers to buy online and pick up in the stores. And if you look at retailer performance over these past couple of months, the retailers that were able to adapt the quickest to being able to offer curbside, being able to transition their business into this world, are the ones that his sales have held up the most. And so think Walmart, obviously, but also think of somebody like Best Buy that was able to keep about 85% of its sales through a combination of e-commerce and curbside pickup, despite the fact that the stores weren't open. And I think it's going to cause a lot of retailers to rethink the size of the store and the roles of the stores they have going forward. Delivery is going to continue to elevate in importance. This is in the world of food service, where it's going to grow to 20% of sales. And as we talked about, the areas of grocery. What is that store experience going to look like? So Amazon Go became a way to speed up the shopping process, but it's also a way to offer a shopping experience that is completely contactless. And this is one of the few stores in the world that I say, don't, you can look at the products, but look up at the ceiling in this store. You can see all the cameras, you can see the network that's put into place to enable the notion of contactless stores. But what's interesting for Amazon is shortly before the pandemic, they opened an Amazon Go grocery store around 10,000 square feet that significantly upgraded the assortment that they could offer in these stores. So will Amazon be able to scale this technology? And there's a lot of other entrepreneurs working on this as well, that will allow customers to go through the store, not just in a self-service checkout way, not just in a mobile app way, but potentially in a way that bypasses people altogether. And as we talked about kind of adaptive, innovative businesses, this is a company called Farmer's Fridge that's here in Chicago, where I am today. And this is a company we'll be featuring in one of our upcoming series on Brave New World. And you know, if you look at Farmer's Fridge here, they began as vending machines for fresh kind of farm fresh products, salads, sandwiches. And that's that picture on the left. And Farmer's Fridge was thriving by putting these machines in airports, office buildings, essentially high traffic places. What happened to Farmer's Fridge during COVID? Those high traffic places weren't so high traffic anymore. In the space of a couple weeks, they transitioned the business to Farmer's Fridge delivery and being able to deliver directly to homes, or in their case, also delivering to hospitals and healthcare facilities that were dealing with COVID patients. Same story here. They were able to hold on to about 80% of their business despite the decline of the kind of traditional fridge space that they had. This will be one of the stories we talk about as we go deeper into our webinar sessions. The final area, and the one that I think has the biggest head scratching and frankly the biggest area for innovation, is going to come around extreme experience. And we say this one could undergo the most change because a lot of the elements of experience were around, how do I get a lot of people into the facility? You know, how do I create buzz? How do I create traffic coming through? So what did you do? You built areas for lingering. You brought restaurants and food service into the retail environment. Creation of these iconic flagship spaces that were in high traffic areas to drive people into the stores. You know, and then there's other pieces of experience around co-creation, around values that we think will play even deeper into this post-COVID world. And frankly, the social awakening that we've seen in the past couple of weeks, where brands and retailers will be measured as much for their values and what they stand for as to the products that they're selling and offering. So, you know, a year ago, I was showing these photos, and this is the Starbucks roastery sitting in Milan, Italy, in a former post office, and this heavily trafficked areas of Italy, and you know, you can see into the store, and it's beautiful, and there's roasting happening, and there's 4 or 5 bars, and there's classes to teach you about coffee or teach you about tea, and there's indoor eating. And you know, you look at where Starbucks was going and this notion of driving experience, and you're saying, this is probably not what experience is going to look like in the future. This is what it looked like in the past. The great supermarket chain in the Northeast U.S., Wegmans. You know, this is a quote from Danny Wegmans that says, "A huge part of our business has been treating our customers really as guests and entertaining them. We can't do that anymore. We lost our mojo. We have to replace it." So, you know, the notion of a Wegman sitting there saying, you know, we're almost in this existential crisis of thinking about what experience means as we look to the future. You know, and this is just a glance at a Wegmans store today, right? Hot and cold food bars, fresh baked bread coming out of the oven and being displayed in front of the customer. Bulk foods area, they're either, you know, closed, packaged, or having to be redefined. And I think this is, as they say, the area for great opportunity. There's for innovation as we come through. And you know, what is that going to look like? Retailers that have cooking schools in their stores, can they convert those to online classes? And here's an example from Giant Eagle. A chain out of the West Coast, Lazy Acres, has taken their classrooms and they're having their own employees do the teaching. So you can do it, you know, via celebrity chefs. You can also do it through your own employees teaching people how to cook at home. Sampling, demoing, interaction. It's likely going to have to look different, right? So how do I provide that interactivity, but also make sure it's safe and hygienic for customers? Food service, the reinvention of food service. You're going to have to be thinking about menus and, you know, how do I elevate off a DoorDash, right? How do I get higher up on their on their schedule? How do I make my food portable? How do I have it hold up? How does it sit there in packaging that works for the consumer? All these are things that retailers and food service companies and brands are going to have to think through. So we think as you look at extreme experience kind of in this post-COVID world, yes, consumers are willing to spend, and you could see sort of that pent-up demand, but there's a higher bar to clear. And so as we tease out experience into the future, the in-store elements are going to have to change. E-commerce is going to become a much more prominent piece of the future. Linking together sort of the physical and the digital in a more compelling way is going to happen. But there's also opportunity, right? As we talk about if food at home remains at that elevated state for the next 18 months, helping consumers learn how to cook, put variety into their lives, create quarantine barbecues, and create this notion of, how do you celebrate? How do you live life, interact in kind of a different way? And then the whole rethinking of those in-store elements that were so important in the future. So extreme experience is going to change in the future. Convenience, value are all going to be drivers of what the post-COVID world looks like. And there's a wonderful quote from Darwin that often gets used, and it's so applicable today, which is, it's not the strongest, it's not the most intelligent that survives, it's the ones most adaptable to change. And what I'll kind of end this morning on is, whatever we think we know today, we also know that it's going to change in a week and a month. And as we started to think about the brave new retail world and what retail looks like post-COVID with GMDC and Retail Tomorrow, we really started to say, what's going to be the right kind of content to start to tease the future in thinking about it. So the sessions, as they're kind of highlighted here, we talk more deeper about the consumer and what the consumer is thinking. We're going to dive deep into that world of e-commerce because we know that growth is going to be almost exponential. We want to get lessons from the world, right? To look at what's happening in China and Asia and other parts of the country. And frankly, the last one, and maybe the most important one, is how do you be leaders in this kind of uncertain world? How do you teach your company to adapt to uncertainty and change? So we're really looking forward to bringing those sessions to you as we kind of look into the future. And with that, Patrick, I want to turn it over to you, and I know we have a couple minutes maybe to do a Q&A.
Thank you, Neil. That was tremendous. And if everybody has any questions, you're welcome to use the Q&A icon on the bottom of your screen, or you can submit them to myself, to Tom, to Keith, anybody on our team. We'll be happy to pass those along to Neil and get those questions answered for you. Neil, just quickly, in terms of the Brave New Retail World, the 4-part series we're launching in July, in terms of how we're going to structure those, in terms of content, what type of elements will we be bringing in or sharing with our members in terms of what we're going to be presenting in that series?
Yeah, we've been working with the team over really the past couple of months to envision what those sessions are going to be. And for those who've had the experience of a Retail Tomorrow, in-person session, which have happened in Toronto and Boston and Los Angeles, one of the things we're really trying to do is bring the power of what those sessions had, but try to do it in a virtual way. So we're gonna have virtual study tours. We're gonna have we want to get people out on the streets and see what's happening in retail right now and focus on those innovative cases. We want to bring a global perspective because we think it's really important that the lessons of how retailers are adapting around the world can help here in the in the U.S. accelerate it. And then, frankly, we will bring a whole lot of firepower through experts, right? So we're lining up kind of the best people in their fields to come talk. So I think that combination is really going to allow us to dive deep into those sessions.
Fantastic. And it probably won't surprise our members to know that we'll also be injecting in some content, some insights really around center store, what's going on with GM, what's happening with self-care, how you should think about opportunities moving forward, not just domestically, but what trends do we see globally in those areas that we care so much about. And Neil, I'm personally really excited about the series. I think delivering a virtual Retail Tomorrow experience is something that is going to be exciting for us and exciting for our members and our guests. So looking forward to getting that kicked off in July. And thank you so much for the content today.